How are you? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, okay. Busy with work. Yesterday, a trade show called to see about whether the members of my trade association would be likely to attend their event this summer. The conference is held at the Javits Center in New York, which is currently a field hospital, and I can't imagine it hosting shows again in 3 months, but they said they may push it off to later in the year, depending on what progress we make. Still, I'm just having a hard time envisioning what comes next. And, of course, people have different definitions of what progress is. Which brings us to today's guest. Christopher Brown is joining me this time from East Austin, Texas. Chris is the author of two great science fiction novels that came out in the last couple of years, Tropic of Kansas and Rule of Capture. And the third book in that universe, Failed State, is coming out this summer. We're planning to record a full-length episode around that one. Whether or not we can do it in person is, again, dependent on your definition of progress. We recorded 2 shows already around those previous books, and I find Chris's work and life fascinating. He's a lawyer, used to work on Capitol Hill, understands the business world, so he and I can kind of connect in all of those areas, as well as the pop cultural background we share with science fiction, comics, etc. But Chris also lives in East Austin, Texas, in a trailer in the Edgelands, which we'll talk about. See, Chris also recently started making a weekly email called Field Notes, which I cannot recommend highly enough. Henry Wessels mentions it a week or so ago in our episode. Each installment comes out Sunday mornings, mixes Chris's prose and photography as he kind of chronicles the Edgelands of Austin and thinks about the intersection of humanity and nature and how the natural world reclaims places after man withdraws. We're already seeing phenomena like that in allegedly developed areas of wildlife venturing into cities now that people are in self-quarantine. And where I live, it's never been an issue. It's not uncommon to look out the window in the morning and see a half dozen deer just loitering in my yard. It's rarer to see a bear meander by, but it happens. In fact, on a run a few weekends ago, I saw like a dozen turkey crossing my street about a quarter mile from my home. I was headed uphill and I just saw one after another just walking by, headed towards the woods. But this is all 25 miles from New York City. You know, we're far enough away that it's not weird. But something else when you see coyote prowling in Central Park or turkeys wandering into Harlem, foxes going through the tunnel between Brooklyn and Manhattan. Anyway, Chris and I talk about Field Notes, Failed State, Edgelands, and a lot more over the next half hour. Now, as caveats go, nothing significant. I forgot from our 2 previous conversations, Chris has a tendency to lean back and then into the mic. So there are some surges in volume. You'll see what I mean, or you'll hear what I mean, and you'll deal with it. Here's me and Chris. Yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of money riding on things going back to some vestige of normal. And that's a good place for us to start. The first thing I want to know just is how you're coping, but beyond that, what you're going to see as normal going forward. So how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I think, I already live and work. I live at home, obviously. I already work from home and have worked from home, both as a writer and as a lawyer for a decade now. And so in one sense, it's not that big a change, and we're lucky to live next to some pockets of urban nature. And so I spent a lot of time already, outdoors alone. And so in one respect, it doesn't feel that different. But then, like the other day, we had to head out on an errand, my wife and I, and just heading through the kind of one of the main streets that passes through East Austin, kind of between where we live and downtown, and seeing all the boarded up businesses and the only people we saw on the street were cops and people that looked like they were probably going to have trouble with the cops.
Yeah.
And, it was pretty apocalyptic, so as someone who writes dystopian novels, it was sort of rather close to home. And it's pretty horrifying we have so many friends who have been much more directly impacted by, partly some, directly by the virus, but many more indirectly by the economic consequences of how we've been responding to the virus. And so we've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out ways to kind of help our friends and neighbors out where we can. And, there are limits to what you can do, but we've been able to do a little bit of that. And so from that respect, you see a lot of, like where we live, a lot of kind of community pulling together and people trying to figure out ways to support each other in their various endeavors during these difficult times. But also wondering if, maybe, something like the suspension of consumer capitalism, the retreat from the treadmill of the, cubicle farm can provide people an opportunity to see maybe other ways in which life could be in this country and elsewhere. And it's kind of exciting from that perspective. I don't know if I hold out a whole lot of hope for much different on the other side of this, but I think it gives us a window into ways things could be different.
Did it change? Now, you were working on the final edits for your third novel, Failed State, which in our second podcast conversation you did refer to as and trying to envision a sort of utopia in the crashing world that you've created in those first two novels. Has the current circumstance affected the way you looked at that book? And, were there aspects of this potential utopia that you're trying to develop that are better fleshed out through your thoughts in the last couple of weeks now with this whole situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, on the one hand, I have to say, writing dystopian novels or even utopian novels in times like this seems almost a little bit of a frivolous undertaking. And but by the same token, is kind of along the lines as I was just talking about. I mean, it does make the desire to kind of plausibly imagine more hopeful futures a more important project, I think. And so yeah, right as we were entering into the shelter in place, I got the copy editor's comments on my new book, Failed State, which is the follow-on to Rule of Capture and kind of takes place after the events of the related book, Tropic of Kansas. And on one level, it's another lawyer story. And as with those other two books, I sat down to look at it here in the quiet quarantine zone and was surprised to find that the thing I had kind of finished in January was like a lot closer to home in terms of the present reality than I had imagined it would be. It takes place in the aftermath of a nation-breaking crisis in which things have gotten so bad that there's a lot of food insecurity, and the federal government seems totally incapable of getting anything done, and people are trying to solve problems at the local level, and even like the courts aren't really kind of fully functioning anymore. But our protagonist, who's busy like going to like state court in Dallas trying to get justice for basically war crimes, finds himself having to go into the kind of ravaged ruins of drowned New Orleans, where there are these people trying to construct a kind of ecotopia and extract a kind of a deeper kind of justice for the generational destruction of the American wilderness and environment. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that I was one surprised at that. I think that hopeful message does kind of come through, and I think that it gives a sense of purpose to that kind of a project, even as you have to have kind of integrity to the fact that utopia is not a real place, and if you're trying to build something plausible, it's going to be a compromised one. But I really do see that as my friend and colleague Cory Doctorow tried to run with in his novel Walk Away, and as Rebecca Solnit really illustrated in her nonfiction book, A Paradise Built in Hell, or Paradise is Built in Hell, the kind of conventional wisdom, especially among cynics like me, is that when things go bad, people will tend to do bad things and kind of look out for number one, that the Hobbesian potential of human society will become immediately manifest. And you see some of that, right, with the hand sanitizer and N95 mask hoarders and whatnot, right? Yeah. But I see a lot more of people coming together to help each other out in the way that Solnit describes in that book. Like, speaking of drowned New Orleans, like how after Katrina, all of the establishment powers kind of failed, but people in the community ended up taking care of each other. So I see a lot of that going on, and I'm hopeful that we'll see more of that, and that we'll see more people trying to explore those kinds of things in fiction.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and something I have asked a bunch of the other, generally the SF writers I've talked with in this series. Have any of your past dystopian readings prepared you for the sheer weirdness of this? Because this isn't a romantic, apocalyptic wasteland dystopia. This is you need to sit on your sofa for another couple of weeks dystopia. Is that something that fiction prepared you for at all?
I mean, I suppose so. It's funny. If you look at the world through the lens of a science fiction writer, you have a kind of pre-existing framework for kind of grappling with and interpreting these kinds of events as they go on. And you have the ability, the kind of Ballardian ability to kind of, on the one hand, experience them and witness them from a certain level of emotional remove. But at the same time, they don't prepare you for, they do in a way. It prepares you somewhat for like the empathic part of this, of like seeing like really bad things happen to a lot of people, including people you're close with.
Sure.
And just seeing, even like listening to some of your other episodes, hearing the trauma that this causes, and a lot of people who aren't sort of super directly impacted in a negative way, but are really stressed out about it, and it's intense. But right before this really settled in, I was watching the Criterion Channel, which I love, had this curated collection of 1970s science fiction, and most of which were pretty dystopian. And I watched one that just felt like super close to home, which was Soylent Green, which I had only ever really remembered for its punchline.
Sure, same here. Yeah.
And then you watch and it's like, oh yeah, it's like it's a rundown post-global warming New York where everybody's like scrabbling to get the next meal, and while there's a few people living comfortable in their towers in the heavens, almost, at the top of the high rises. And I don't know, it's funny how often those kinds of windows into the future, that they almost seem kind of silly at the time of their making, and then they prove like freakishly prescient.
You could tell me if it's too personal a question, but you have a new child.
I do. Yeah.
Feelings about the world this child is toddling into and inheriting?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's a great question. It's one I think about daily. I don't know that I have a clear answer to it. I mean,
things you're planning to apologize to the child for as you know they get older. And
I mean, I will.
I'm so sorry.
I will only apologize to her for whatever bad legacy of stupid things I've done that she has to inherit. I mean, those are my things to directly apologize for. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future holds. I think the first time I talked to you, you asked me if I was an optimist or a pessimist, and I said I was pretty pessimistic about the human future and pretty optimistic about the future of the natural world, and I still feel that way. I feel like I do feel like we're at kind of an inflection point, and that. You can, I mean, in this virus, I see, rightly or wrongly, I see the byproduct of the kind of imbalanced relationship with which we coexist with the natural world. And that's kind of, an undercurrent running through all of my fiction and my nonfiction. And I don't know, I'm hopeful that this generation coming up is going to do a better job than we have. And I think that things like the way that this event shows that a lot of our kind of really basic status quo assumptions about how the world is supposed to work, how the working life is supposed to work, how our professional lives are supposed to work, the work-life balance, and how we spend our days in the most basic way, that all of those things you can see they exist for a reason, but they're not set in stone. When it can all be like turned off, like in an afternoon on one Friday the 13th, right?
Yeah, that's the broader picture of the whole tech disruption world, right? The things that we accepted as it's like this when we were growing up, therefore it needs to be like this forever. We've been seeing that breakdown in what we thought was an accelerated mode, but it turned out it was all in slow motion.
Yeah.
The past month has taught us how fast it can really break down. Well, it's a good way of seeing it. I thank you for triggering that for me. I like
well,
that.
And the other thing I'd say about that, Gil, is I feel like I don't get too down on the future because I really do believe in the potential of people to kind of take agency and contribute to better outcomes in their own communities, and I see a lot of tremendous potential in the kind of generation coming up in that regard, and so I remain kind of cautiously hopeful, especially as they endure experiences like this, and and again, kind of see that things could be different.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't espousing the disruption as devastation necessarily, but the fragility of what we think is the permanent present moment. Yeah, that can all be gone like that. Tell me about Field Notes, about the weekly email, where it started for you, what you're doing with it.
Yeah, so thanks for asking about that, Gil. I mean, this is a project I started in earnest in mid-February, kind of right after I got the final substantive edits of the new book done. But it's something I've been kind of percolating in my head for a long time. It's essentially a weekly newsletter of urban nature writing and photography, mostly based on my, kind of daily rambles around this neighborhood where we live in East Austin here in Texas, in what is a prototypical American version of an edgeland, a kind of liminal space where the heaviest, human development, light industrial development, and kind of commercial and office stuff bump up against wild nature. And I've been really interested for a long time in, just kind of old school nature writing. And I've been doing, and it's started to bleed into my fiction a lot. I mean, starting with Tropic of Kansas, where I set out to write what I thought was going to be kind of a book about, mostly about kind of political, like that the idea content was mostly about political theory, but it ended up mostly being about these kinds of spaces and kind of what they have to teach you, and what they have to teach you about how illusory the barriers we create in our minds between us and our habitat and wild nature are. And so trying to, take people into those spaces and at the same time, infuse nature writing with a little bit of the lens of science fiction or speculative fiction, of like kind of thinking about that sense of wonder of kind of seeing the alien around us and seeing the kind of, unevenly distributed post-apocalyptic, things in the landscape, as it were. Kind of trying to crank out little sort of maybe kind of Ballardian nuggets of nonfiction, but with maybe charged with some human feeling. I mean, you've been reading it. You tell me what it is. I'd be curious to hear your take.
Well, I enjoy them, and the idea that you're reflecting on what these, as you say, liminal spaces are like, what lies just past what we consider the city, or in my case, just on the edge of this suburb back towards the more developed world, as it were. It's like our, well, I don't know if it's your favorite, but a book that you and I enjoy greatly, the Peregrine, that J.A. Baker book, where it's just what happens when you get away from the human world, or the remnants of it, as things start to repossess it. It's why the song that keeps cropping up in my head through this whole process has been "Nothing But Flowers" by the Talking Heads. Where the apocalypse hits and the guy just wants to go to 7-Eleven. Everything is overgrown and taken over, and I wish I had a lawnmower. That's his thing. Right. I want candy bars and chocolate chip cookies, and everything's gone. And what's left? Yeah, what's left after that? And what it's, particularly this last one you did, where it's just you at night in the river, or in the water, just the moon and all the things that could be around you that you don't know anything about. It's something that I think we're all disconnected. It's like the experience I had of reading the Peregrine and then the Area X trilogy pretty much back to back that same year, Jeff Vandermeer's book.
Yeah.
It just, where I live is on the edge of the woods. Just walking my dog down the street became a different experience. You start to just hear things differently. You hear not just the birds, but the different the different pitches of the birds, the different songs, what it means when the leaves are rustling, whether that's a deer or squirrels or something else moving through the woods.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's right on the money. It's the way. I mean, I'm not a capital N naturalist, right? I'm not, I'm not the guy that can walk through the woods and name every single plant around him. I mean, I'm lucky if I can just kind of name the major trees and the major animals. And
in my case, it's just, is that poison ivy? That's poison ivy. That's pretty much the only thing I can get. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm at the level of like knowing where to get the best poison ivy remedies, because sometimes you can't help yourself. But the way that experience and like the kind of sensory appreciation of the natural environment that's extant in the middle of the city accumulates slowly over time through, like you say, through walking a particular path or through a kind of eco-psychogeography, as it were, where you kind of break your normal path and you're like, oh, instead of going on the sidewalk, I'm going to go like walk through the traffic island, and see where that gets me, or bushwhack through this empty lot. right? There's a lot of that in there. And the other thing about it, is it's just kind of fun to do a writing project that's just not about selling books and hawking books and the kind of the promotional business of and that kind of defines its own category in a way. It's just a little newsletter, and it only goes to people who affirmatively subscribe for it. And I kind of love that format on like a whole lot of levels. And so it's been a lot of fun in that respect as well. And I think it suits our moment in some weird way. I didn't know this was coming when I started working on it. I mean, not really. And, but I think it's a good little kind of escape valve that in fact kind of gets right back to the heart of the matter, as it were.
Sure. Is there how are you going to monetize this? I'm just kidding. But is there a longer goal or any thought of collecting what you're doing there? Or do you feel like this is really the format, that sort of ephemerality of a newsletter?
Well, the content in the newsletter kind of, it is written for that format, and that is where it belongs. But I'm hoping to use it to kind of think through the material in a deeper sense, and to write, a book length work of nonfiction, or maybe something that's kind of, speaking of edgelands, at the edges between fiction and nonfiction, that works with the same material.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that, as opposed to, and I've got a book deal to collect this. So I'd rather see this kind of incorporate itself into your future writing.
Yeah, it'll be something different, but cool. And yet the same.
Yeah. Now that you've finished with the edits on Failed State, do you have a reading project for the self-ISO period? I know your self-ISO is a way of life, but is there anything you're thinking, if I'm not going to be leaving for a while, this is the thing I really want to sit down and read?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like that big classic book that I'm trying to tackle.
It doesn't have to be classic. I'm probably going to read a whole bunch of John le Carré in the next couple of weeks just because I can. But
I mean, I have accumulated. I'm looking here in my trailer where I work, and I have a pretty prodigious pile of books, many of which I've only kind of dipped my toe into. I've been reading a lot I've been trying to do some translation from German, which is hard for me because my German was weak to begin with and is rusty, but I'm really interested in kind of digging into sort of material related to German Romanticism, from right before World War I, and how it sort of morphs into the Romanticism made of steel that leads into the 30s and 40s, and how that line that we think kind of got cut off in 1945, I think, continues in weird ways right up through the present in our own culture. So kind of exploring some material like that, and I've even been learning to play an old kind of a German lute. That's a kind of a musical instrument associated with the Romantic movement and with the Wandervogel movement. That's a family heirloom I inherited about a year and a half ago, and so I'm learning to read music, which I didn't know how to do before, and kind of digging into a whole different world through the prism of Renaissance and Baroque and folk music. And I am reading, in connection with that, I just started reading the Prose Edda after translating a letter, reading about some people like singing songs from the Edda around a fire outside Jena in like 1914. It's like, oh, there's some weird territory there. So kind of exploring some of that stuff.
I was going to say, I just posted one of my few remaining podcast from the before time, March 4th, before the world as we know it ended, with this great German to English translator, Tess Lewis. So I can connect you guys if, you get stuck on a particularly thorny question or just, how would you translate X? And it was really weird going back and listening to something that was just a week before when we knew things were bad, but we didn't know how bad things would really get. Keeping in mind, This is New York and New Jersey where we have numbers that are just breathtaking.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. No, it is. And it is like an abrupt before and after. I did watch a couple of pandemic movies, which was interesting. I watched Outbreak. Partly my son, I have an adult son, and he lives in Korea, and so we were kind of joking around. This was like before it really broke over here, and that's a real, that's kind of that's a turkey of a movie, but a kind of entertaining one. Maybe it was funnier before things really broke out here.
Yeah,
and then
there's
last
things
week,
that we think will be good, but
so. Then last week I rewatched The Andromeda Strain, which I had read the novel and like watched the movie a million times on TV as a kid. And that holds up to me remarkably well. And you could only wish for the idea of these, Cold War scientists that are like super competent and put in charge of, licking the problem in a long weekend, in their secret nuclear bunker. But,
trust me, I work with the pharmaceutical manufacturers, formulators, and all that stuff. And, it's going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of work.
The one book that I'm going to tackle by one of your guests that I started and haven't been able to finish because I was so busy is Rusty Brown by Chris Ware.
Oh, good. Yeah.
God, that's so good. I mean,
you don't even know until you get to the last third of that volume. You will be knocked the hell out in a way that, as much as you may have liked Chris's work before that, it goes to another level. Completely. It's mind blowing.
Well, just as a work of like kind of artistic truth and a kind of, comic book naturalism, he so nails the kind of ennui of like the Midwest in the 70s. It's just astonishing. It's really genius. And
you're going to love it. By the time you finish, you may cry by the end of the that volume.
Oh, that would be okay.
Yeah, I'm down with. I did email Chris about being part of this series. He didn't directly say no, but the fact that he didn't say yes told me, pushing him on getting the headphones and mic and everything else set up, probably not a Chris Ware thing. Much like Seth, he was like, Gil, you couldn't possibly expect me to have any of the technical requirements to do this, right? So Chris is doing fine, but he's not the sort of guy who's going to be participating remotely in this sort of thing.
I'm glad he's okay.
Yeah. So any last notes or last messages you want to leave for listeners on the off chance things go really hairy in a hurry? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sitting here in my 1978 Airstream, wondering if I'm going to have to hit the road. We are going to go on a road trip next week. We're going to try to drive to the Midwest in a day,
really,
and to go visit my elderly parents. And so, I'll report back. So yeah, if you don't hear from me, I'll probably be, stranded somewhere in the actual Tropic of Kansas.
Jeez.
But I'll be curious to see what it's like out there on the highways.
Here in where I am, if I show up anywhere in a car with New Jersey plates, I have a feeling shotguns will come out. So I think we're pretty much trapped in the Northeast if you're up here. So
my hair, my quarantine hair is already to the perfect length of like 1970s Jan Michael Vincent, so I'll just have to go full Damnation Alley on them if things get hairy out there.
Yeah, that's been the line I used after the superstorm was that in the Northeast things went from 0 to Mad Max in about 4 seconds, but that's only because nobody was going to get the Damnation Alley reference, which especially with the flesh-eating cockroaches and all that stuff. But yeah, so you got that to look forward to. If you don't mind, I would love to record with you again, either in the middle of that trip once you get up there or once you get back, just so we can find out how the the trek through America works at this
Yeah,
this moment.
I would love that. That would be fun for sure.
Cool, man. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Gil.
And that was Christopher Brown. Go check out his website, ChristopherBrown.com, to get more info on his novels, Tropic of Kansas, Rule of Capture, and the upcoming Failed State, his essays, reviews, other work. And when you're there, you can find a link to his great weekly email, Field Notes. And you can also just subscribe directly to that at edgelands.substack.com. The link is there on ChristopherBrown.com, and it'll be in the show notes for this episode. Otherwise, you can follow Chris on Twitter as NB_Chris, N as in Nancy, and on Instagram as ebitdada, which is EBITDADA. We'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18, at gmail.com. You can find contact info at our sites, vmspod.com and chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can find all of the COVID-19 sessions at that latter site. And in case you're interested in the remote setup that I'm using, it's Zencastr.com that allows me and the guest to interact, record, and get each of our audio tracks uploaded so I can work from that instead of one incoming signal. It's spelled Zencastr, so no final E. Zencastr costs $20 a month, but my Patreon supporters are more than covering that, especially since I am no longer spending money on parking, tolls, coffee, subway rides, etc. for all those in-person episodes I was doing, especially in New York City. So if you can spare anything, this is a time where a lot of people are in need. So if it's writers and artists you want to support, go find their Patreons, GoFundMes, Indiegogos, Kickstarters, whatever. Tip jars, they still exist on people's sites. Go give to the artists, writers, creative people you need. Show them some support. Donate to charities, especially your local food bank. And if you're in need, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. I keep a page on that website, chimeraobscura.com/VM, with links to past guests' Patreons. But I want to expand that to others who haven't been on the show yet. So if you have some way for people to help support you, send it along. I will post it online. Maybe I'll put one of them in each of these daily episodes too. I'm Gil Roth. It is April 14th, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.